welcome back to LatinX Learners. We are so happy to see you. It has been way too long. We apologize for the delay, but we know that you understand. And just know that we hope to bring this show to you in the spirit of just continuing conversations and helping us all feel stable, helping us all feel like we're still continuing the good work that we do. We know that it's not a very long distraction from the hard realities that we're facing, but we feel like we have good friends in you, and we just want to share that feeling of friendship and fellowship and take our minds off of the hard things right now and focus on some different ideas, different thoughts, and of course, you know, we're going to make you laugh along the way. So, Daniel.
So it's so nice to see you, Michelle. I know we've communicated back and forth during this COVID-19 environment, and we've stayed in touch, but I'm really excited to get back out in front of our viewers and all of our supporters and advocates. We released the newsletter for last month and had tremendous feedback, and I got emails. I know you got emails from response regarding it, and we're really excited about this year, or this month's edition of the newsletter. And our subject for the month is really predominantly white institutions, and we're looking at different aspects of it from a student perspective to a faculty perspective, and we hope to, as part of that series, bring you our guest today, who will talk about his experience at a predominantly white institution as a faculty member. But the newsletter will involve a whole bunch of other stories from students and resources that we're putting together to deliver a really good newsletter to you. So how are things with you, Michelle? How's life?
Life is good. I'm really happy to be where I work. Our administration has been so wonderful throughout all of this, and made the decision, you know, early on to take us, you know, through the fall semester online, you know, in different modalities, but mostly online. And so we've been able to plan ahead, you know, and that makes a difference. Leadership matters. So I feel really good about work. You know, the kids are great. Everybody's here in the house. We're on top of each other. Sometimes we want to strangle each other, but mostly we're just happy to be safe and together.
Well, good.
The
same here. We're busy, you know, operating from home. Work is great. We've been able to still connect with students and engage with our faculty and staff. So it's been a wonderful time. I've been at home. I've taken a lot of projects on at home. I started a garden, which Daniel does not garden, but I have done some projects here at the house, and so it's been really nice. I think I've really enjoyed the time and not having to commute in and out of Houston, so that's been really good.
Yeah, I didn't try to garden, although we have like jalapenos and tomatoes in a little garden box, but I don't call that gardening because all I do is water it, and I pretty much don't touch it. My grandmother is really
But if you don't call that gardening, then I'm not gardening, but I call it gardening.
My grandmother is a gardener. She can bring dirt to life and turn it into a lush forest of productivity. I don't know why I can't do that. My skill seems to be bring something to the brink of death and then bring it back to life over and over and over and over.
Bring it back to life. For me, I've conquered the garden. I mean, it's growing. It's huge, but they're in big, right? Like they're porch patio pickers, and I have tomatoes and squash and zucchini and asparagus and strawberries, tomatoes. I made some salsa yesterday, so it's going well. And my grandfather and great grandfather were big farmers and big ranchers, so I think maybe I don't know, but for this summer only. I don't know that I'll keep doing it.
Well, good for you. I'm proud of you. My grandmother would be proud of you.
Well, good. So let's jump into today's topic and cover our topic. Do you want to go ahead and bring in our guest? Do you think it's about time to bring in our...
Well, let me introduce him.
Sure. Let me bring him in, and you can go ahead and introduce him.
Before he, it's like the curtain on Johnny Carson. So this is a special session for us, especially because it's our first time to really interview someone. Daniel, you realize that? We have never interviewed anyone, so this person is the first person for us to interview, and after I introduce him, I'll tell you an extra story about him. But Fernando Benavidez is joining us specifically to talk about this topic because he works at a primarily white, or he has worked in primarily white institutions. He's a tenured associate professor of English at Delaware County Community College in Westchester, Pennsylvania. And that's a long way from home. He's from the Rio Grande Valley, like me. He is a fierce advocate for Latinx students, and he is researching this topic for his dissertation, Advancing Equity for Latinx Students Teaching in a Hispanic Serving Institution. His work has been all over the spectrum when it comes to, English. So British, American, Chicano literature, which I'm very proud of because he's also a published writer. He got his Master's of Arts in English from Texas Tech University, which I know you like, Daniel.
Yeah.
His Bachelor's of Arts from English at St. Edward's University. And he also has a Master of Arts in English from the University of Maryland, so double masters. He's got a musical background. He's an animal lover. Most importantly for our show, he's the founder of and chair of the Latinx Initiatives and Outreach Network at his institution, and he has done a lot of work for Latinx students. He's very proud to say that he's outspoken, and because I know his family, here's the extra information, I can agree. He comes from a long line of wonderfully outspoken, educated people who are involved in the community and who care. Fernando and I started school together in kindergarten.
Way back.
Haven't seen each other in Brownsville, Texas, and haven't seen each other since graduation, or maybe at a party after graduation.
Not really much in almost 30 years. We just reconnected recently,
Yeah, and it's been a wonderful thing because we're connecting on something that we're very, very passionate about, and it's Latinx issues. So, Fernando, wonderful to have you.
Thank you for having me. A lot of pressure, first interview. I always say, it's a lot of pressure to be the first of anything. But, in the Latino community, even in 2020, we're still first in a lot of things, which is sad, but good, at the same time, I would say. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you inviting me, Michelle. And Daniel, I appreciate being the first interview. Hopefully more to come, more well-known people you'll interview. I always say nobody knows me, except my students, maybe. And, like my dad used to say, ni lo conocen en la casa, right? Thank you. Hopefully people will like the interview.
Yeah, thank you so much. That phrase reminds me of being at home, right?
Yeah, whenever somebody would be like, oh, look at that guy, like, oh, ni lo conocen en la casa.
Don't be too impressed is what they're saying. Don't be too impressed.
Yeah, they don't even know it was own eyes.
We were laughing earlier, all of our friends out there, because Daniel, I don't know what he did or what we were talking about because the time flies so fast and I have no concept of time right now, but he gave me a compliment and an insult in a sentence. And I was like, ay mexicano.
It's hard to do, yeah. But it's common in the culture.
It is very common in the culture.
Skilled at it, Michelle. I'm very skilled at it. Compliment and backhanded at the same time.
At the same time, yeah. We learned it from grandma.
And people don't recognize it, right? Oh, you get nice.
Right? Yeah. Right.
Well, we are going to be talking about Fernando's experiences in his career as a faculty member. And we've certainly had our own experiences, haven't we, Daniel?
We have. And before we get to Fernando's questions, Fernando, we have a couple of questions for you, specifically about your experience of being Latinx at a predominantly white institution, and so a series of questions that we'd like for you to answer. But before we jump in, Michelle, I thought it'd be nice for us to kind of share our experiences. I know both of us attended a community college and then went on to a university that both of those institutions were predominantly white. And so do you have, in your thought process and in your memory, do you have a recollection of some experiences that you could share as a student? And granted, for me, I was in college a couple of years ago, and you maybe a little bit more, I'm not sure. But do you have some context or anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, he's 29, y'all. He just turned 29. He was 28 when we started this last year. And I don't know if you'll remember. It's hardly believable, isn't it?
Yeah, you only look 27.
Don't help him. Don't help him. So I went to not just a college, but really just an entire county that was predominantly white. And I remember being surprised by how people talked to me, pointed out things about me that I had never thought to point out in anyone else. Because I come from Brownsville, and Fernando and I were joking earlier, everyone in Brownsville is Mexican, even the white people. Doesn't matter. It's just how it is, right? The predominant culture is something that everyone celebrates and enjoys. When I got to Ranger, I heard things like, "You have an accent." And I thought, you have an accent. It was so shocking that they were calling something out about who I was, and it was kind of confrontational. It was very open and public, and they said things like that. I went home with my white friends to their houses, and I remember one of my friends who I love dearly, and I love her mom, but her mom called me Taco, which, for them it was maybe a term of endearment, but at the time you're not sure how to take it, so you laugh. So I think maybe I probably laughed off a lot of things. What was interesting to me is that was the experience that kind of tainted things for me. Once I got into the classroom, it didn't matter. That was where I was comfortable. That was my comfort zone. So it's kind of, different from other people where maybe they would have struggled in the classroom because of white professors or different cultures. I did better in the classroom. That's where I knew I was on solid footing. And I didn't feel uncomfortable. So that was me. How about you?
Did you ever ask the tonta mom if you were like a hard shell taco or soft taco with extra
Were you chicken, or were you beef, or you carnitas?
If I am a taco, it's beans.
Beans and cheese.
That's it. Just like bean tamales. So, I might have, no, I didn't ask, but it's just, that was a totally different world. I won't mention the town, but I would have been the minority there for sure.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I would self-proclaim that I'm a beef fajita taco with, right, a little bougie. So no, I asked you that question, so I have to kind of think of myself. And, I went to community college, and then I went to four-year university, both of which are in geographic regions in Texas that are predominantly white, Republican, conservative.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up in that environment, right? So my hometown, I grew up in an environment where that was the norm, and that was where I was raised. And so I had long acclimated before I got to these institutions to that kind of culture. And surprisingly for me, it wasn't until I went to Texas Tech that I really had a connection with my Latino Mexican identity, right? When I think of the community college, I met my wife who is Hispanic, right? Who is Mexican. And there were very few of us, right? And so she liked me, I liked her, and, one taco with another taco, and you can make, babies.
Make a combination plate.
Yeah.
So that was at the community college, but when we transferred to Texas Tech, which is the second most conservative place in the United States, second to Provo, Utah, right? So it's really conservative. I adapted well to the institution. I remember the people were really, really good. West Texas people are perhaps the greatest people you'll ever get to engage with, despite their beliefs, right? They are very genuine, giving people. But I was also a president of a large fraternity on campus that was predominantly white as well. And I remember running for president, and I had to have some initiative and people who guided me and said, hey, you should run, right? And I remember asking the people who thought I should run, why do you think I should run? And I was looking for, a little bit of self-fulfillment. Man, you look great, you're able to manage, you can get things done, all of these things that I truly believed of myself. And instead, I got what I gave you earlier, a backhanded compliment, right? Which really started me, it allowed me to begin to think about microaggressions and macroaggressions on the Latinx community, right? And I remember I was on a balcony and we were out sitting talking about me running for president, which was a big deal at the time. And the guy said to me, you're really articulate and you're able to get up in front of people and talk. And at the time, I felt insulted, right? Because as I thought about it, he was from Lubbock, the guy that was telling me this, and he went to Tech. He probably had never, ever seen a Latino who could speak English articulately, right? That's point A. But point B, I was offended because the connotations associated with telling somebody that they're articulate really means that we didn't expect you to be, right? I'm shocked you are. And so for me, I really had to think, did he really think that I was going to come to Texas Tech and walk into the band or to the environment with, hey, ¿qué pasa? What's up, homies? Right? That's not me. And so, but the feeling I got was, oh, you're so articulate, we're surprised. And so I've always, since that point, cautioned anyone. Mm-hmm. Because you don't often hear white people call other white people articulate.
No, right? You're right.
Right? So when you associate the word articulate with someone who's colored, either Mexican American or black, there is some underlying assumptions there that one could perceive. Not saying that but one could perceive that that perhaps you didn't think I could speak English to your expectation ahead of me displaying that for in fact that I can. So, right. For me, I really took that culture differently at Texas Tech. I took a Hispanic literature course. I took a history of Chicanoism, and I embraced who I was at Tech at a predominantly white institution, and became more Latino, more Chicano than perhaps had I gone to A&M Kingsville.
Yeah, I hear you.
That's a good point. Yeah, I had some similar experiences, except I had a break between my realizations and while I was at school. So, as I mentioned to you guys, I graduated with Michelle from high school. And then, we went our separate ways. I went to a predominantly white Catholic private school, which really meant, in Austin, St. Edward's University, which really meant that there were a lot of rich folks there, rich kids, so they were driving around Porsches and things like that, whereas I had an old truck. And being in the environment like that was very shocking to me. And I think I became apathetic about the classroom, unlike how Michelle used it as a way to keep her bearings, straight. I kind of rejected it, and I acted out by not going to class and everything else. And so I was kicked out my first year of college. I was put on academic probation my fall semester, and then my spring semester I just didn't go again, and I just got kicked out. Then years later at 20, so that was around 19. At 26, I went back after doing a bunch of other stuff. I was playing music for a while and hanging around. Really nothing productive, I guess. But I went back, and I was older. I was the older student. Some of the professors, because I was the older student. First of all, I switched from biology to English, just because I had always been a writer, even in high school. I always liked the arts. I used to draw a lot, and so I was a humanities guy. But I think culturally, I was taught to say I want to be a doctor when I grow up. You know what I mean? What do you want to be? We'll ask you when you're 5,
Right.
anyway, so I just switched. By that time, I was on my own. I'm like, I'm not going to let anybody tell me what to do, culturally speaking or whatever. I just need to get back to school. So I switched to English, which was a great thing. I love English. I love literature, and I was doing very well. Then after that, I didn't care about the predominantly white context anymore, right? Because I was more focused in on the success that I had to do because I had already messed up before.
Right.
I started thinking about that context though when I got to grad school, and I started. I was already reading, but I started studying more focused, in a more focused way when I did PhD work at the University of Maryland in Chicano literature. And then I started thinking about sort of the LatinX experience in a predominantly white context, like I had when I was a freshman at St. Ed's. And although I realized that I'm the one that didn't go to class, I also started to realize that maybe the institution had a little bit of a responsibility to make me feel welcomed or like I belonged. There are several studies, which all of us are aware of, that tell us that it does matter when students have Latinx representation at a higher ed institution. It does matter. Mm-hmm. Yes. And it really does matter in their success, that is, regardless of their intelligence level. Because I graduated, like Michelle, at top of our class in high school. We were not dummies. We were smart folks. We were top 5%, whatever. I got a scholarship to St. Ed's. I squandered it, but I got one. Mm. And so it's not a matter of intelligence. And so when I got back to the college at 26, president's list, dean's list, every single semester, I got those letters. And I tell this to my students, community college, because again, I don't think, regardless of what your background is, not a lot of students have a linear trajectory to education, right? Okay. So I had that 8-year break, but now I'm a professor, ironically, right? Like I got kicked out of college, but now I work at one. They pay me.
I told you were disruptive.
I was, yeah. I disrupt my own self, and I disrupt stuff. And then but that experience now made me reflect very deeply about my own students, which is why I'm a fierce advocate at the college. So just to give you some perspective, I mean, we're like a 55-45 college, meaning 55% white students, 45% students of color. We have about a 33% Black population, but the Latino population is like 3%. However, I'm the faculty advisor for the LatinX Student Association, which is like a social club, like a club that does things. They do scholarships, fundraising, they do presentations, and they are like, funnily, the most active student group in our college.
Really?
Even though they're only a 3% super minority in the college, they're very active. They're all over the place. They have members from all different backgrounds, Black, white, Latinos. It's a very multicultural club. Mm-hmm. Everybody likes the stuff they do because they always put up like Zumba dancing and, different stuff. They always have little events going on. They're very active. And I'm very proud to be their faculty advisor. But change is very difficult at a predominantly white institution. When I got there, I started this organization that you mentioned called the LatinX Initiatives and Outreach Network. Mm-hmm. And it was my tenure project. So, but I continued it after I got tenure because I thought it was important and it worked.
And we're over here in Texas, like tenure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we did a lot of great things, and because, like I tell you, I'm a loudmouth. I got some things done with the group, and the group was made up of a bunch of people from the administration as well as faculty. So I brought in the administration, like the first year director of first year experiences. I brought in the enrollment director. I knew who to talk to because those are the people that are going to have the president's ear. And that's how I got the president's ear at the time. So, for example, the college I work at is 60 years old, okay? They have never had anything translated into Spanish before. No pamphlets, no nothing. That was one of the things we pushed for. And at first they were like, well, we have to hire a translator. Yeah, it's money, but that's a change you have to do. Even though, again, we only have a 3% student, group of Latinos in there. I told them it's important because the college education experience is a family experience for the Latino community, which means your mom and dad and uncles and tios and abuelos, they're all involved. And a lot of them don't read in English. And so how is your son or daughter or grandson or grandson going to come home and say, Mom, here's some forms, and they can't even read them? It's not fair.
Right.
So they did that. Reluctantly, but they did it. The other thing we had changed the website. We have an en español now. And this just happened like 3 years ago. I mean, this is the ridiculousness of it, right? And so a lot of this predominantly white stuff, which is true and factual, right, because of the difference in minority amounts at colleges,
right?
Somewhat misleading in the sense that in Pennsylvania, okay, you're talking Pennsylvania, this is the Northeast, okay? In the state, I did some research on this to make my argument about the translations of Spanish materials and the en español part to my college, to my president at the time. He's not the president anymore. The poor man died last year of cancer, but he was my president at the time. He was very, very liberal white guy. Anyway, so he would always say yes, especially after he knew what kind of guy I was. He's like, oh, there's Fernando asking for something again. Yeah, give it to him, find the money. Anyway, the second most spoken language in Pennsylvania is what, do you think?
I'm in Houston. I have no idea. Do you know how many languages?
Spanish.
You're kidding me.
I'm not kidding. Like 300,000 families in Pennsylvania speak Spanish. First is English, second is Spanish. Third is Cantonese, but only 20,000 families speak Cantonese versus 300,000 families that speak Spanish.
And you had to usher in the changes 3 years ago.
Yes. And nobody paid attention to facts. So I don't like to talk. I don't like to argue things with my opinion. Nobody cares about what I think or feel. Those are feelings. Everyone has them. I need to give them facts.
Right.
The other thing we pushed for, which is another fight I had with them a little bit. So one of the fights, just real quickly, we were in a meeting. I brought in the enrollment manager lady. I brought in the first year experiences. I brought the president. I brought the vice president, the provost in, and I brought the director of the ad director, the one that makes ads, right? Because if we're going to do translations in the website, the guy that does that has to be there. And you get the same pushback, which I don't know if you guys have ever gotten trying to make changes, which is these. So I teach English and writing. And one of the things I teach in my writing classes is all the fallacies, the logical fallacies that you get in arguments.
Yes, we have.
So I had to fight against the fallacy of all or nothing, right? Because somebody said, well, we have students that speak Cantonese and we have students that speak French from Africa. So are we going to translate like that argument? Right? Like, if we don't translate everybody's language, we're not going to do Spanish, which is an absurd argument, right? And it's a fallacy, right? Like, all or nothing fallacy. Luckily, I didn't want to be the loudmouth in that moment because I would have probably said something bad or dumb, right? Or angry. But the director, Hope, the director, she was there and she told the guy, look, this was her logic. I think she knew him better than I did. We have to start somewhere, she said. Let's start here, right? Like, as though it's a first step. But really, that was the only goal, was to translate it into Spanish. It's not like we were going to do Spanish and then next year German and then the next year Cantonese.
And here's the thing, Fernando. Let me interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
Daniel and I have had this discussion before about just being grateful to be at the table, and we want to push back on that. We're not supposed to be at the table. We should have always been at the table. We might have owned the table before you came to the table and said there was a table. Absolutely. And so in that moment, when your colleague said what she said, that was kind of an ingratiating, thankful, grateful type of, and we have to caution against that.
I agree.
I'll never forget at my previous institution, I was making that same argument that we need things in Spanish and we need to do it right. And someone said to me, and I can't give much information because they probably watch the channel.
Everybody watches the channel.
That's right.
Somebody said to me, but I don't want to give these students false hope that the classes are going to be taught in Spanish. And I said to the person, I said, well, you're discounting the ability of our students if you think that they can't use ration and logic to understand that the K-12 system that they just came from provides instructions and explanations in Spanish, yet the content is delivered in English, and they're going to come to this institution and get instructions and support in Spanish, and the content will be delivered in English, right? But how offensive to think that by providing support in Spanish,
Right.
that our students will then demand, right, that courses be taught in Spanish.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, so you get a lot of these fallacious arguments, right? And then the other problem I found working at a PWI, and again, I went to a lot of PWIs, like I was telling Daniel, I went to Texas Tech too. I got my master's there. University of Maryland is more diverse. It's in DC, right? But still, professors predominantly white.
Right.
You know, when I got there, actually, 2007, they had just hired the first Chicano professor in 2006. The guy had been there a year. And of course, as soon as he got there, what happens to all of us in a predominantly white institution? All the students, what?
Block him.
Go with him, right? So now he's the only guy that we all go to. There were a lot of Chicanos there going to grad school, and he was our advisor. We didn't have a choice of 3 or 4 or 5 different advisors, right? Him, that was it.
And if that's not a message, what is?
Right. And poor guy, I felt bad. I didn't finish my dissertation, partly because it was hard to get in touch with the guy because he was writing his book. He wants tenure.
Yeah.
He doesn't have time to be advising while he's also the first year professor there trying to write a book so that he can get tenure in 3 years. You know what I mean? Like, not fair.
Right.
So it took a lot from us. A lot of us left the program, actually. I did. I was one of them. I just
Really?
didn't work. I got a job, I got a job then instead of finishing my dissertation. And anyway, same thing happens here at the community college. I'm one of 2 Latino professors, and all the students come to me, and sometimes even black students come to me. Because there aren't any. There's one black professor, but he works at a different campus, in English, I mean. You know?
Yeah.
And so,
You know, what's interesting, Fernando, is the burden that we bear.
yes.
This work, right? When I engage with the students that I work with, and the first time that they see me and they're unsure on whether I'm Italian or if I'm Mexican.
You're right.
Yeah,
I get that too.
yeah, when they come
Yeah,
on,
they tell you, you're Mexican? Like something's wrong with me. Like, you know what I mean? They're like, no, yeah. I'm like, oh, I thought you were Italian. Like, okay, that would have been better? Like, what?
Exactly. Yeah.
an
I'm
event,
a burrito. I'm not a taco, I'm a burrito.
I was doing an event the other day, and I had somebody say, "You're Mexican," and I wanted to play La Chona in the background. It's like, how Mexican I am, right? But you know, the moment that you're engaging with these students and you say that term of endearment that just really secures
Yes.
your involvement with you, right? When you say, "Come here, Mija, what can I help you with?" Right?
Yes.
You can see their entire world change, right?
Yes.
That you, I, and Michelle, and many other of our Latinx colleagues feel is, how do we continue to support such a growing population, such a growing demand of students who not only need help through cultural navigation of going from our Latinx environment to higher education, but also are first gen. So on a top,
Yes.
in addition to that, they also need explanation of financial aid. They also need explanation of what a syllabus is. They also need explanation of who the bursar is, right? Like, really.
Counseling center.
Story. You know, Daniel.
I've walked many students to the counseling center.
Right, and that's the kind of support that students need, and it made me think about a term that I just learned. We're having Estela Ben Simone come, and she just retired from USC, and she's going to speak on racial inequity at our college with our deans and department chairs. And one of the terms from one of her articles was first generation equity-minded practitioners. And it doesn't mean what you think it means. They say, very openly, we lifted the term first generation and we're planting it, we're assigning it to all of us in higher education who have never been equity-minded practitioners. Right. We have never considered this. We have never looked at students through the lens of equity. And so I really like that term, first generation equity-minded practitioners, because I think it puts everybody on a level playing field. and the experiences that you have had, Fernando, as the only, or one of the two Latino, professors, and Daniel, having people come up to you and ask if you're Mexican, usually that's a leading question. It's, am I going to feel comfortable with you once you say yes? That's really what I'm looking for, right? I used to get that in the classroom all the time. Miss, you speak Spanish? Yes, I do. Oh, that's a different level. Now I'm at a different level, And so, those kinds of things matter, but it's all coming back to a lens of equity,
Yeah, I mean, at least I didn't ask you if you were Spanish.
Spanish, what is that?
Yeah, well, from Spain.
Right, no, I know, but
but I'm saying, what is that? So in university, when I was at the University of Maryland, I would do other things. I was in a group at the Literacy Council of Maryland, the state of Maryland, just as a volunteer, and I would teach English to non-English speakers. And there were a lot, I was the youngest guy there. There were a lot of older white women who volunteered, right? Retirees and stuff.
Yeah.
And when they'd meet me and I would say, Fernando or whatever, oh, are you Spanish? And I would always on purpose, to make a point, I would say, oh, no, I've never even been to Spain. And then they would be, they wouldn't know what to say, right? I'm like, have you seen a Spanish person? They have blue eyes and blonde hair. Have you ever seen a real Spanish person? Like Jorge Ramos, right, from Univision. That dude is probably mostly Spanish. Even though he's Mexican, right? But look at him.
And it's interesting because it's this you have two different things happening. You have people like our students who are asking leading questions about ethnicity as a means of trying to find some level of comfort.
Navigate.
And then you have people navigate. And then you have people asking questions about ethnicity to what? To assign an identity, you have to think about these things. And I think it's healthy. And even though it can be messy, I think it's important that we call out those experiences the way that you did, Fernando.
I think that's very important. And I think the other thing that people need to realize, especially in the context of higher education, like for students, from a professor's perspective, I always have to explain this to students because we do a lot of work in my classes, in my English classes. A lot of our topics of writing have to do with issues of social justice or something. I always frame it in that way. We either have readings about it or whatever in a global context or even a local domestic context or particularly with race. Or whatever. I always have those discussions. Those are hard discussions to have. They're not easy. But I feel like I control the classroom well enough so that we can have something intelligent enough to, get something going. And part of the confusion that sometimes comes when we talk about racial inequities and stuff is the difference between race and ethnicity, which is really only a problem for Mexicans, right? So I tell my students all the time, like, I'm white.
Yeah.
And they look at me like, what? I'm white. Like, I'm white. I'm not an Afro-Latino. I'm a Latino with European Spanish blood, which means I'm white. Racially, right? I don't claim black. Whenever they say race is black or white, one or the other. And then ethnicity is, I hate Hispanic, but Latino, right?
Right.
Latinx, right? And so, and they look at me like, what? You're not white? Like, I am, dude. I'm white.
Yeah.
They have to understand the point I guess I'm making too is for us in a higher ed institution, in the context of education, and then representing like we do in our positions at the colleges, we have to also understand that a lot of people don't understand our identity. Mm-hmm. It's a very complex identity. I'm not saying that white people and black people have it easier in terms of identity. It's a lot different for them. But my point is that in terms of explaining ourselves to the world, they don't know where to put us. Yeah. A lot of times what that leaves us is ignored. You know what I mean? Because we don't have a pocket or a box to be in. Or we all look differently, like,
Yeah, or misunderstood, right?
Or misunderstood, right. Worse.
As the president of TACHE in Texas Association.
Yeah, I saw that. I didn't even know we had a TACHE. I was part of AHI.
Yeah.
AAHE. I was in grad school. I went to the conference. They brought me in and everything. But I didn't know. I just joined today. TACHE.
Well, thank you. Hey, it's a great association.
I love it. I mean, I identify as Chicano.
Yeah, but
I don't identify as Hispanic.
See, that's the challenging part is that to other people outside of our identity, they may say, okay, I'm confused. You claim you're white, Fernando, but
Right.
Hispanic, not really, but Latino. And now you just claim to be Chicano. Like,
What is that? Yeah.
talking about, right? And so it's not only the confusion about that, but it's also the confusion about the terms, right? There's always been this long narrative that when I say that I'm the president of a Chicano association, that I'm this radical,
Right, like Raza Unida stuff. Yeah.
hello.
Yeah.
And the idea is that really I can be radical, right? But I can be radical in my articulated version that you need to be, right?
Right.
And so you're exactly right. I think it's
there are different ways to be radical, right?
And so, there absolutely are. So, Fernando, as you were having these experiences at your institution, what was the trigger for you to then, after having all of these students coming to you and, serving as an advisor to the masses, because of who you were, one of two. So when did you decide you needed to start something out of that?
So before I was a grad student, I never had the power to start something. I mean, I was part of grad student programs in grad school, Latino groups and stuff that grad schools had, and we did a few things, get-togethers and discussions and things, but nothing like this. But now I was in a position of power. And, I don't mind. I mean, there are a lot of articles out there about the added burden to minority professors, right? Because we're the ones that the minority students come to only.
Right.
Versus white students. Who else comes to me? White students. so I have to do both. You know what I mean? Like, I have my regular, mostly white students that come to me because they like me and they look for advice from me and they want to take more classes from me and everything, which I appreciate and love. But then I also have the Black and Latino students come to me, right? On top of that, right? And it's not even, because those Black and Latino students don't go as much to white professors. You know what I mean?
Right. You're making a really good point.
So my point here is that I don't mind advising. I just think it's unfair to the students on an institutional level to not give them more representation.
Agreed.
In other words, hiring us, more of us. You know what I mean?
Intentional effort. Right.
Right. And so you mentioned my dissertation. Part of my dissertation is to study HSIs. I've never worked at one. That are community colleges, and to focus in on Latinx professors, what they think their role is in an HSI in terms of serving Hispanic students, like their own. And I'm sure it's going to be mixed. I don't know yet, right? I'm sure some Hispanic professors are like, I don't really care about my identity. There are those, right, that don't care what they are. They just want to be a professor. And then there are those that, like us, care. And we focus in on advocating for those students. And part of the thing the reason I started the Lion group is because in a predominantly white institution, which I don't think I would have done, maybe, I don't know yet, right? Maybe I would have, but at HSI, which is more Hispanic students, is because I felt like we were not being represented, or the students weren't. I mean, I don't need to be represented. I'm already, I'm a professor, so I don't care. I don't need a Hispanic administrator to, make me feel better. But they do. And so what we also did 3 years in a row, we had these huge conferences that I established and I got money for, where we fed a bunch of people and I brought in speakers. The first speaker I brought in for the first year, we had about maybe 150 students there, which was not small, but not big. We have a huge auditorium at our college, but we were in the smaller one. And I brought in the publisher of the only Spanish newspaper in Philadelphia, Al Dia. And I got him because I knew somebody that knew him, and I kind of almost begged him, and he said, okay, I'll do it. So he came in and he spoke about being a Latino business owner and everything else. The second year, after that first year was a success, the president got excited. But he's like, let's make this big. Let's have it at the big auditorium that holds 300 people in there. I said, okay, let's do it. The second, I got the Secretary of Education, Pedro Rivera, who became the first Hispanic Latino to be the Secretary of Education in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Perfect. He just got elected with our governor that year, 2016? No, 2014. So we brought him in and he agreed. I had a hour-long interview with him. Mm-hmm. And that year we had a big effort. So I got like I told you, I bring everybody together. I got enrollment and I got the people that are focused on recruitment. Mm-hmm. And we probably had like people because there are like a bunch of universities out here around here, from all different universities. And we brought about 7 high schools
Wow.
There were like 400 people at that conference. Everybody was like, what did you do for them? All Latinos, all Hispanic students, a lot of them, some of them ESL students that were brought from high school and stuff, so they can see themselves represented at the college.
All you did was you just called the family. Yeah.
Yes.
Did they call ICE? I mean, were
No, they did not. Even though it was public, I even did an interview on like a radio show, ABC radio show and stuff. It was great outcome. The president was so crazy impressed. He said, and I told him, you probably never had so many Latinos in the college at one time.
Yeah.
You know, since this conference. So the next year we did it again, another 300-400 students. And this year I brought a friend of mine who became the professor of the year at Pennsylvania. They gave out an award to him. He's Puerto Rican, but he's a writer too, and he's a performer. He teaches English at another community college up here in the north of the state. But I brought him in, and he has a one-man show, and he talks about being from Puerto Rico and coming in to the United States, and like you were talking about, Daniel, realizing he was Hispanic.
Yeah.
In the United States. In Puerto Rico, he felt he was white, and mostly because of his class. He wasn't a poor guy. But then he came here, and he was brown.
Mm-hmm.
Came to the continental United States from the island, and he said, and that kind of switched his mentality all the way around, and now he's all Latino, right? Like,
yeah.
So I like that growth. I like that we all have stories of personal growth and self-awareness, but I think part of my job here at this predominantly white institution, back to your original question of what it's like, is to create an atmosphere of acknowledgement about our culture. You know what I mean? Not only for us. Yeah. We understand ourselves, but there were a lot of white students at that conference that I formed every year. And some of them were mine, right? Because I told them, you better go to that conference. I'm throwing it. And all my students went. And I asked them to write about it since I teach writing.
Awesome.
And inevitably, which studies also show, all my white students were completely amazed at what they learned from the conversations that the Latino community was having. I have friends that are immigration lawyers in Philadelphia. I brought them to talk. I have another friend who has an immigration center at Cabrini University. I brought him in to talk. So all these leaders. And then I had a panel, which I thought was the best part of the conference, of just my Latino students at my college. Talk about their experiences at a PWI.
That's always the most powerful thing you can do.
And my white students were like amazed. They were floored at just understanding not only the culture, but the issues that we have within our culture that they never knew about, right?
Right.
And that's exactly what studies show, which is to say that the people, so a lot of times, the argument in higher ed is, well, which I think was my president's view at the time, which is, well, Fernando needs this conference. I think I should support him because we want to support our Latino students. But in reality, you know who was more of a benefactor of that conference?
The white students.
Yes. Abso-freaking-lutely, which people forget.
Yeah.
But they think it's for us. I don't need to hear another Latino talk about problems in higher ed. Why?
You
lived I lived it, right. But a white professor, right?
Yeah.
Coming in and listening to today's broadcast, today's show, will learn a lot. Probably doesn't know anything that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Whoever watches this show.
You're right.
You understand? And that means that the benefit that they have is 100%, whereas maybe our benefit would be 15-20%, because I would be like, oh, Daniel, that's an interesting point. Oh, Michelle, yeah, that's great, But for us, we need the world to understand, which I think creates equity, because it creates equity through empathy, right?
Like that.
Once we understand each other, then we see each other on a more human level. And I think that's what happened to my white students. I mean, I was very amazed and impressed and surprised by the feedback I got from the white students that went to see the Hispanic conference.
Well, what you're doing there, if you think about it, because 3 times we've mentioned, I'm sure it's 3 times, or maybe it's 3 because I said it in my head as well, and I listened to myself, late term Latino identity, like ownership. That happened to me as well. Point. When I became a professor, Fernando, we talked about how I used to be very conservative and I had these different views. As soon as I became a professor, all of that changed because I had the great mixing pot of students in my classroom.
Right.
And when we talked about what does the professor feel in the classroom, the Latino professor, I felt responsibility for all the Latinos at my college. And there are like 33,000 students at my college. And I feel like I'm personally responsible for all the Latinos, right? But this late term identity ownership is definitely something that we should maybe talk about again in a future call.
I agree.
Because I think what many people who are watching now are going to realize is that they had the same experience. And it's because of higher ed in some way, shape, or form.
Michelle, I would challenge that notion in this way. I think that there's so many of us in different age groups, and certainly I'm in this age group here, right? But when we talk about age groups,
millennials.
He's a millennial metrosexual.
There you go. Yeah.
It's all of it. When you think about it, who have this late term kind of realization, like you said, right, of it. But it's because if you look at the environment that we grew up in, us three, right, and you look historically where we were in colleges, and we were at predominantly white institutions, we didn't have a lot of exposure. We didn't have a lot of people who look like us, right? And
Exactly.
as the world is shifting, right, I believe that more and more of those students who come to HSIs, who have those experiences earlier, will embrace it at a much more earlier time than us, and hopefully that'll be the catalyst to changing the environment, right? But I'll tell you what's most important in this, that we've kind of hinted around and we really haven't said it explicitly, and I'll be the radical person to say it, is capitalism, right?
Yes.
The reality is that the demographics are changing not only in the state of Texas, but in the United States. And when we think about that, consumerism as it relates to higher education is also shifting. And so we can't have a false sense of appreciation for our colleagues who are now embracing Latinos or Latin because of a notion of realization of how good we are. But right, simply and cautiously, from a capitalistic standpoint of enrollment drives numbers, right? And I'll take that. Right, I'm not saying we won't take it, but understand that that doesn't necessarily mean an embracing of the culture, understanding and empathetic leadership will give you equality.
And Daniel, in your role, especially because you are the registrar, you are enrollment services. It has to be a very interesting position to sit in, to know what Texas is going to look like in 10 years and to realize where institutions are probably heading very strategically.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can tell you where they're heading and I can tell you where the data is going. It's going Latino. Now, the struggle, the challenge, and what I don't see happening is is how institutions will navigate hiring faculty, staff, and administrators that support the population that's coming, right?
Look, here,
all of them will say statements. They will put diversity initiatives. They'll hire the one person that they need to hire. But systematically looking at their hiring practices and looking at just ratios, right? I could look at all of the community colleges and universities in Houston, which is a majority city.
Yes.
Very few high-level administrators are Latino, right?
Yeah, they don't know each other.
Former president. She just left, right? And so he was the only one that was a sitting president in the state of Texas, right? So
Texas was once Mexico.
So I do see the capitalistic environment encroaching upon higher ed and how that will impact Latinos in terms of enrollment and embracing the culture. But you can't confuse that falsehood with an acceptance of the culture and confuse it with capitalism. Because if it was truly an embrace of the culture, they would begin to think about how to hire faculty that engage with our students and look like them in the classroom. They would begin to think about how they can hire and promote Latino administrators to make high-level executive decisions and be the face of the institution that represents those students as well.
Well said.
Absolutely, yeah. And so I think you brought up some points that I want to make for me, because I think you're exactly on point with that. I think that we need to critique, we meaning Latino professors who are in positions of power and administrators who are in positions of power, need to critique the system, okay? First of all, I'm not ungrateful for the fact that the president supported all my initiatives and things. Sure. But I think, to your point, Daniel, he was interested in increasing enrollment with Latino students. Because again, he knew that a large amount of families speak Spanish. in Pennsylvania. Freaking Pennsylvania. We're not even near a border of anything. So, secondly, that's okay, right? I understand he's the president. He wants to increase enrollment, and it means money for the college, etc. But you're right. The institution so it's easy to recruit. I'm not saying in terms of like the job of recruiting is not an easy job. I'm saying compared to sustaining a campus culture that makes the students successful and feel welcome. That's the part you're talking about, which is the hiring process of professors and administrators who think getting the students here, easy. Making the students stay, very hard.
Yes.
Right? That has to do with hiring practices, right? Number one. The other thing I wanted to say is that the problem that I also noticed being at a PWI is that although I got these things done, they only got done because I was here, because I'm here. In other words, so there are a lot of things that happen at institutions that whoever is there, it gets done, which means it's institutionalized, right? Like if John is there, it'll get done. If Nancy is there, it'll get done. If Jose is there, it'll get done. If I leave, this is not getting done, which is problematic. That's to your point, right? And that's the problem with diversity initiatives, that often colleges will do things like a la carte, right? Like this year we'll have a conference, and then next year you have to fight again for the money to have that conference again. And then next year you're there begging for money. You know what I mean? It's not an automatic thing like a lot of automatic things are in institutions, which they should be. And if, like you said, if it's important enough, they should say, the Lion thing, or even those conferences that you had, Fernando, even if you die tomorrow, we're still going to have one next year, which is someone else is going to do it, right? Because it's a part of the cost. But that's not the case. That's what I found out. You know what I mean?
And there's the responsibility that we have too. Let me add one more responsibility to the already, heavy burden of feeling like we're responsible for all Latino students.
Right.
I have always believed very strongly in, and my friends at my institution will tell you this, I believe very strongly in involving people and mentoring more Latinos in any position that they're in at the college or at the university to get involved in these initiatives, to get it, like for me, first generation, Sanjac First Gen, that's something that we own. And I'm very vocal about telling people, you're the next generation. You have to step it up. And I'm not ashamed or embarrassed or afraid to tell people directly, Renee, Jose, Ryan, I'm not afraid to tell them, it is your responsibility. You have to step up and be the Latino. You have to take on that responsibility and join me so that it's not just me. It can't be just me.
Right now, at this time in history, that's how it has to be.
It does.
Hopefully in 50 years, it
won't.
Different. But right now, that's the reality of it. You know? I mean, and I also question, that's why I'm studying HSIs and Hispanic students and Latino students, and because I've always been very interested in that name, Hispanic Serving. It's a designation. It's a government designation, right? It has literally nothing to do with what colleges are doing.
Capitalism, did you say, Daniel?
I was saying it's not an ethnicity definition. It's a capitalistic definition.
Yes.
Not confuse that, right?
No, exactly.
Something that most people don't realize is the strivingness for it. It's not a Hispanic servant. It's a Hispanic enrolling for cash.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to say. So I don't really like that, because historically speaking, unlike HBCUs that literally are focused on the Black community and serving them, and they do. I mean, they become schools that are lines to medical schools, right? So they graduate students to go to medical schools. A lot of Black doctors or lawyers, boom, boom, boom. A lot of Black lawyers because they go to HBCUs, right? I mean, in Maryland, they had one right there, right? So, and tribal colleges even. They're also very literally focused. Hispanic serving institutions are the only institutions that are still predominantly white, but called something else. And what that does to institutions, I think, is it makes them struggle with their identity. In other words, if you were a college last year you were predominantly white, and then this year, because a lot of Mexicans came in, are now Hispanic serving, are you going to advertise that? A lot of them don't. Yeah. Isn't that funny? They really do not, even though they are. They don't ever say on their website or anything, we're Hispanic, nothing. Like they're not proud, or they don't know what to do with that designation now, right? because most of their students are still white, right? But they have a huge 1/3, of Latino students, and they don't know what to do, which means they don't know how to serve them.
So who are good examples? I wonder, who are good examples of
I'm pretty sure there are a lot in Texas that are good examples because, again, there are a lot of Mexicans on there. They're not new to them, right? To the institutions. Like, okay, like up here in Pennsylvania, there's only one HSI, Reading Community College. It just became one last year. Has 26% or something. A lot of them are what they call like aspiring HSIs, right? Like they're trying to be. They have like 18% or whatever. 25% is the cutoff, right? But again, I don't know what that means to them.
There should be some sort of and forgive me for not looking this up, my fair friends, but there should be a handbook. There should be a process.
Yes, some guidance from the government if they're going to be giving designation. There's nothing in a lot of these colleges. There's nothing in their mission statement about it, like all that stuff, right? Which is
that's a call to action
level.
Yeah. We're making a call to action here, and I think that's a good place to be. Is asking our colleagues out there, what are your HSIs doing? Because we're looking at a PWI that's really showing us how it should be done, how it could be done, to institutionalize things that really are not a huge responsibility for you to be doing, but the effect, leading to our third question, the effects, I think, if we judge based on the your students' support of the events that you had, are overwhelmingly good, right?
And it's also a new designation, right? Like it started in 1992 or 3, the HSI designation. Hasn't been around that long in terms of education. But also, I would say that
we were sophomores at Pace High School.
Yes, I know. Yeah, in the 90s. Yeah, right when we graduated. But so that's part of the problem with this kind of designation for us, Latino students, right, and Latino professors, because unlike a black professor that works at an HBCU, there's no confusion there. He knows why he's there.
It's a good point.
His advocacy that he like how we're advocates is not ever questioned, or he doesn't have to fight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's an HBCU. Everyone knows, from the president down to the janitors,
right?
Who is, right? They have an identity. So do the tribal colleges, actually. Mm-hmm. They're not confused. They weren't something last year and something new this year, They've been that way for over 100 years, right? 200 years now.
A challenge.
And we say HSI is Hispanic Serving, but how do we define serving?
Right.
Good question.
Hispanic Serving, or is it Hispanic cash cow? And those are the questions that we have to ask. And I say cash cow in terms of enrollment and in terms of the opportunities that an institution can enroll in based on becoming HSI.
Absolutely.
So I think we've touched on a whole bunch of great topics today. But Fernando, before we go, I'd like to ask you just one question. We talked about the challenges that you faced in a PWI and promotion of Latino and Latinx culture and initiatives. Can you share with us perhaps one of the greatest rewards for it? A success story, something that you come to the end of the day and you think, this is why I do my work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have a few examples, particularly the policy examples that I gave. One of the things, we've talked about a lot of Hispanic students, and we like to assume that a lot of them are Mexican Americans, but in reality, there are a lot of undocumented Latino students, right? And without a plan in place federally, it's a patchwork effect, right? Like some states have this, some states have DREAM Act, some states don't. Luckily, Texas does. Pennsylvania does not. So, we have a Republican Congress. We have a liberal Democrat governor. But I don't know if we're going to have a DREAM Act anytime soon. So that means that a lot of the colleges here are on their own. If they want state money, they cannot allow undocumented students to come. But I knew a few, and I would mentor a few, who went on to go to the university from our community college, which I'm very proud about. A couple of computer science majors, an engineer guy that wanted to be an engineer. So I'm very proud of those students who went beyond and were able to succeed. But one of the things that we pushed for, which we finally got, which is very brave of the president, I give him a lot of credit, is so what we were doing, which is what Mexicans are used to, is they were letting undocumented students through the metaphorical back door. In other words, we'll let you in, we're just not going to stay, that we're letting you in. And I told my president that that's problematic to me. And I gave him the backdoor metaphor. I said, yeah, Latinos were always let in, but through the back door so no one can see. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's very offensive to me, I told him. He didn't understand that until I explained it to him. I said, so metaphorically, that's what we're doing to our undocumented students. You're letting them in well and fine, but you're not saying it. So I need you, and I said it like this, I need you to advertise that we are fine allowing undocumented students on our website, on the admissions website. In the paragraph where you say, come in and study, I want you to say, regardless of your documentation status or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. It took him like 6 months, and he did it.
Wow.
He did it. And then there's a Philadelphia group up here that I was friends with one of the advocates there, and she did a lot. They do a lot for immigrants, undocumented immigrants especially. They're an advocacy group. And I told her, I sent her the emails with his email telling me that they were going to do it. And she announced it to all her cohorts and all her connections that Delaware County Community College is the first college to announce publicly, college, not just community college, like college. We have lots of them up here. Mm-hmm. Penn State, UPenn, Westchester, a bunch. Immaculata, Caprini. None of them were saying it out loud. And we were. So I was very proud of that moment because one of my arguments to the president was, why do we have to wait till someone else does it? Why can't we be the first? Which I think is what a lot of institutions do, right? They wait and see. And that wait and see never works for Latinos. No, we have to go out and grab it. You know what I mean? Nobody gives you anything in this world. You have to go out and get it. Take it. Try to get it, right? So that was one of my accomplishments. And then we started to establish a millionaire, very interestingly, the year after that, a millionaire retired guy, banker, just older white guy, probably like 70, came and said, I want to give scholarship to undocumented students because they still couldn't get federal money, right? So they told me, the president told me, hey, this guy I want you to talk to him. So I went and I had lunch with him. Larry Jilk is his name, very nice man. And he was all for undocumented students. He gave like $25,000. And then I learned just recently, he's still around, thank God. This was about 3-4 years ago. And I've had a few lunches with him since. We just talk and, I tell him what's going on with our students and stuff. And he's very happy about it. He actually put us in his will, the college. Wow. He's a millionaire. So I don't know how much he left or how much he's going to leave. But I think it's to support undocumented students. And he was very adamant about it. He says, I want to support undocumented students. So we got some funding for them, which is always a big problem for undocumented students. And we also got the college to admit. So here's what happened. This is a funny story, this will be my last thing. The state, that same year, emailed the provost and asked her, what are you doing with undocumented students? So she told me, she came to me and said, Fernando, they just emailed me the legislature and they want to know what the college is doing undocumented students. Are we landing them in? Are we charging them? Oh, the other thing is, I asked him to please charge them in-state tuition if they graduated from an in-state high school.
Right.
Because they were trying to charge them international rates because they were not citizens. And I told him no. And he did that as well. Thank goodness. He listened to me a little bit, right? I think he knew it was the right thing to do.
Sure.
Again, that's really what drives people if they're good people. I think he was a good person. Anyway, and she said, I don't know what I'm going to do. Let me talk to the president and I'll get back to you because I don't know about this because I think they might have read that on our website or whatever. Somebody might have told them that we're now saying we're allowing them. So she asked the president and she told me what happened after. That's how I know. She said, I asked the president, what do I want me to do? And he's like, tell them the truth. You know what I mean? Like if you lie, they're going to find out and then we're going to be liars. So might as well tell them the truth. And then if they tell us stop, we'll just have to, we'll have them stop. So she told him the truth. This was like around in August or September. And then she didn't tell me this till after like a couple of months. Then in November, she comes in and I said, hey, what's going on with that question? Did you tell? And she said, I told him the truth. Jerry, the president told me to tell him the truth. So I told him we're accepting them and we're charging them in-state tuition. And I said, what'd they say? She's like, it's been like a month and a half. I haven't heard anything. So thank goodness It didn't. Right? They didn't say, "Well, we're going to pull funding." I mean, anyway, we only get like 15% of our funding. I mean, not that it's nothing, right? But I mean, most of our funding comes from tuition, right? Like most colleges, right?
Sure.
We don't get a lot. I'm sure Texas is probably the same or worse. We don't get a lot of state money. It's getting less and less every year. You know, the legislation is taking away money from colleges all the time.
What's so interesting, Fernando, just with that story of highlighting kind of your rewards for all of your work is it really shows what we spoke to earlier, the burden that you play, right? You're a policymaker, you're an officer meeting with people for lunch to get funding support, right? And this is what we're talking about when we reference the burden that we bear as Latinos, serving in primarily white institutions. But I would also say it's not exclusive to primarily white institutions.
No, it's not.
Size statuses that are out there can create falsehood that the administration and or board of trustees embrace that outside of funding, right? So I think
absolutely
interesting thing. Well, Fernando, we know you've got to go, and we appreciate you carving out.
Thank you for having me.
Any final thoughts or any final words?
Well, I mean, just a reminder. Thank you, Fernando. This has been. I have enjoyed this so much. I think all three of us have. I hope that our viewers do. But it's just really nice to connect with people right now. It's nice to connect on issues that we're passionate about. It's nice to recognize that there's still work to be done, that there's a lot of energy that we can take from this, and, you know, in our joint desire to go back to a normal world. And so I hope that we can continue that work, whatever mode we're in, you know, in our institutions. I do want to remind everybody that our newsletter will be coming out after this episode launches. Yes, Daniel?
Yes, it'll be coming out at the end of July.
Yeah, so I'm working on that. We've got some articles, great articles to share with y'all, and some more artists to feature, some more Latino artists that we want to get the word out on. And just stay in touch with us. We look forward to continuing the conversation, and I think we've got some ideas for who we want to interview next, maybe.
I think
it's a good idea. What you guys are doing, when Michelle told me, Daniel, you guys had a show and I looked it up online, I thought, this is what we need. I mean, you guys should have 1 million followers right now. This is what we need in the culture, in particular within the context of higher education. I think education is the key to anything. Just like I said earlier, the reason I can be a loudmouth is because I can back it up with my degrees. And the people that I'm being a loudmouth with know I have degrees, right? So they can't, you know what I mean? We're on the same level now, right? So they always ask you, whenever they ask a Latino, how high do you want to go? My argument would always be, I want to go as high as I can, where I'm eye level with the people on top.
Very good.
That's where I want to go, right?
Right, absolutely.
Where I'm eye level with the mero chingon, as they say. I mean, right? Why can't we be, right? I don't want to be under him or under her.
No doubt about it.
I want to be eye level.
That's right.
I 100% agree with you, and it resonates so well with us, I'm sure. And we appreciate your compliment on the channel and the work that we're doing.
Great work you guys are doing.
Thank you so much. Michelle, we have a grito today, and we at the end of every show we do a grito, and today our grito goes to a dear friend, a mentor, and my former president who was the only Latino male in the state of Texas, if that sends a message to the state, that was a university president who now becomes a chancellor at University of California, Merced, who is one of the only, I think he is the only Latino chancellor in the UC system. So for us, I know the constituencies out in California are excited to receive him. We are grieving him here, but our grito goes out to Dr. Juan Sanchez Munoz for transitioning for the University of Houston downtown over to UC Merced, and we wish him the best of luck.
We do, and Dr. Munoz, that one hurt to see you go, but we're so proud. And I got to say, I emailed you once when I saw you speak, and you spoke passionately, and you talked to the crowd at, I think it was a Satapro, Daniel, and he said, you know, we've got to do more for Black and brown students, and he just said it so clearly and so bravely. And I emailed him later and said, I'm going to work for you one day. And now he just really messed up my career plans because California is very far away from Houston. But yeah, that's a great grito. We are so proud of you, Dr. Munoz, and we're going to be watching you in the trailblazer that you are.
Thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.